Christine Lagarde, the managing director of the IMF, has just sat down, the very busy host of this event. We're thrilled to be here. Thank you for joining us on
Lovely
Bloomberg.
to have you.
You know, I was at your speech last week at the New York Economic Club. You mentioned the three-speed economy, the fact that different economies around the world are recovering at different paces. What is the prescription for dealing with this lumpiness that we're seeing in terms of the world recovery?
Well, we would like to move to full-speed recovery and not three-speed. It would be far more efficient, and there would be more spillovers between the various zones. For the moment, we have that three speeds. We have the emerging market economy and low-income countries. We have moving very fast and doing quite well. We have this second group, which is on the mend, which has done quite a bit of work, particularly on its financial sector,
where the US
which includes the US, but also Switzerland, also Sweden, for instance, and where there is more work to be done. And then you have the group that includes the euro area and Japan to a lesser extent, because the jury is out as to how Japan is going to do with its very significantly revised monetary policy.
Which you have come out in support of. The question is, why are we moving backwards? The IMF just downgraded its global growth forecast. Here we are 5 years after the financial crisis. If you had to pinpoint the why can't we take off?
First of all, let me observe that we have slightly downgraded, but we are moving up from last year. A little bit, not much, but up. So the global economy is growing, thanks to essentially the emerging market economies and the developing market economies. So it's growing. What, in our view, could help it to grow better and faster would be the completion of the financial sector reform, would be the completion of the rebalancing between the various economies, and would be a clear focus on a sensible fiscal consolidation path anchored in the medium term and specific measures intended to develop growth, jobs and equity. So you have it has to walk on 2 feet.
Yeah.
And one is a set of combined policies that are specific to each of the three groups, and those three construction sites, if you will, that have started but need to be completed.
On the fiscal side of things, the IMF has been relatively critical lately on the United States' fiscal path, on the austerity that we have taken. What is the U.S. missing in this regard?
Time. Because what is needed is clearly fiscal consolidation, but good fiscal consolidation, not blind.
Blind and blunt.
Blind and blunt is the problem. Sequestration produces just that. And we need fiscal consolidation up front, but not too much of it. At the moment, we see too much of it. 1.8% fiscal consolidation is too much at a time. But the US also needs more fiscal consolidation in the medium term, and clearly anchored, clearly communicated, so that economic actors know what to expect and know that the determination of the US authorities is to bring the debt down, not by cutting now so strongly, blind and blunt, as I've said, but over time and making it irreversible.
The New Yorker has a column this week, The Crumbling Case for Austerity Economics. The International Monetary Fund, are you a defender of austerity on a global basis?
We are not exclusively focused on fiscal consolidation, which is the scientific word for austerity, if you will. We are very concerned about the right balance, and that means lots of things. If you look at the policy mix, it means fiscal consolidation, yes, in all advanced economies pretty much so, because they are heavily indebted and they are running deficits and have been running deficits for most of them. But it also means the right monetary policy in order to encourage growth, in order to lower interest rate in the long term. It also means structural reforms, because in many economies, including the advanced economies, you have bottlenecks. There are areas of business where one cannot go without having the right license, without having the right permission, without having the right set of attributes that very often are really obstacles in the way of unleashing the entrepreneurial spirit that is in each of us. So not just about austerity. But a combination of those three is very often needed.
It brings us to Europe, where austerity has been the tough medicine and the prescription for dealing with the debt crisis. The problem is it has devastating effects on the economy. What would you tell the Europeans to go through with it?
Most of them have to do some fiscal consolidation because they are heavily indebted and because they have been running large deficits. But it's a question of how much and how quickly. And for some of them, there is no reason to rush into upfront, heavily loaded fiscal consolidation. Look at the Netherlands, for instance. They just decided, and I think they rightly did so, to reduce the pace, to continue to do it, but to allow a bit of time in order to let growth, prosper, which is clearly needed and makes fiscal consolidation much easier.
What should the ECB be doing? Should it be doing more?
The ECB has done an awful lot. For the last couple of years, it's just incredible how much out its traditional boundaries it has gone.
But they have room to do more.
It's the only central bank that still has a bit of space. And I trust that they will be using that space when they feel that it will be most useful and they have the biggest leverage effects. What's in it? It's not just the sake of reducing rate. It's making sure that it travels to the real economy and that the banks that lend to SMEs, to households, will actually apply a lower rate as well. So it might be that, to restore the fluidity, a bit of work needs to be done at the other end, at the receiving end.
If you look at global central banks right now, the US and Japan come to mind, Europe as well, they're setting such high expectations. Are they too high, and do they veer too close into the fiscal realm? I think of the 2% inflation target in Japan, the unemployment target in the United States, and whatever it takes in Europe.
Well, the unemployment target has always been part of the traditional targets of the Fed in the US. The Japan central bank has clearly innovated by pushing the inflation target from 1 to 2, by doubling the monetary mass by a factor of 2, by deciding to do so within 2 years. So it's a 2-2-2-2, which we welcome, which needs to be completed, though, by 2 other principles that have to do with structural reforms in Japan, very much needed. Anybody who wants to enter the Japanese market will tell you so. And also the fiscal consolidation plan that needs to be anchored to reduce the Japanese deficit and the debt of Japan.
So it sounds like you're optimistic overall on this.
Deliberately, decisively, desperately optimistic, yes.
Not cautiously.
I think there's some good news. The fact that the average debt around the world has stabilized. How much too much there is of it, it has now stabilized, and the deficit on average has been halved since the beginning of the crisis.
Yeah.
So there are some good news. It's a question of keeping at it and pursuing the major reforms that have been initiated.